Sophie, you're back.
I'm back.
You're back in my kitchen. We're talking festive baking.
Yes.
At the end of October.
Very festive.
Yeah. This is what we do. When you record it compared to when it goes out, it's often two different times.
Yeah.
But we have got you back here especially because I think you're going to make something special for us.
Yes.
And also we want to pick your brain about festive baking tips and anything that's going to help people at this time of year, because this is, big baking season.
Hosting, baking, loads of people around, busy. Yeah.
And the opportunity to play and bake and do all those things. Really.
Yeah, absolutely.
So tell us what recipe you have created.
So I've done a recipe today which is to be as your Christmas dessert.
Right.
I don't like Christmas pudding.
Me
like
neither.
most people I think of my generation, I just hate it. I think it's horrible.
Yeah.
So I never have Christmas pudding, but I've designed this dessert to be as impressive as Christmas pudding. It's a twist on a baked Alaska, but it's a spiced pear baked Alaska tart. So Christmas is all about maximalism.
Wow. Yeah.
This is a maximalist dessert. So it's a pastry case, Damson Jam, Frangipane with lots of spices and orange zest, plums, vanilla ice cream, and then Swiss Meringue, which we're going to blowtorch as well. So it'll be very special.
Wow. So that sounds to me like a lot of processes.
It is quite a lot of processes, but they're all quite simple processes, and there are ways that you can cut it down. So you could make your own jam. I'm using one that I like to buy. You could make your own ice cream. I'm using one that I like to buy.
Okay.
The rest of it is actually pretty straightforward. I mean, you don't even have to blind bake the pastry case. It just all goes in the oven with the Frangipane in it. So it's really easy.
Oh, okay, cool. Easy for you, of course, because you're the baking goddess.
I think it'd be easy for most people. But yeah, it's a good time to really take the time with a few nice processes and enjoy it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, question from me then. I'm not the same kind of baker as you, anyway, much as I've had a go and I do every so often. But pastry is never really my thing.
Yeah.
So my pastry will often end up quite, I forgot what the word is now.
Bit tough? Or...
Yes,
Yeah.
that's the one. So why is my pastry ending up tough?
It could be tough if it's overworked.
Right.
It could be tough if you haven't left it to rest for long enough in the fridge before you bake it. It could be tough because it's a bit too thick. I'm doing a different style of pastry today. It's similar to a short crust, but it's more of an American style short crust. And my issue with pastry is everyone says, oh, with short crust especially, got to rest it all the time, mix it into a dough, rest it, roll it out, rest it, and it just creates overworked pastry. So for me, I like to do all of the first bit at room temperature. My butter isn't even chilled, it's just room temperature. Get it into a dough, roll it out, get it in the tin, and then it has its rest. That way, in the end, you're actually doing less work on it.
And are you, I'm going back to some of my school days here. So are you mixing the butter into the flour with your fingertips?
Yes. So butter into the flour, fingertips, but you don't want it to be breadcrumbs like in English short crust pastry. You want a few larger flakes there because the American version also has a couple of laminations in it as well, which just helps to kind of keep it really nice and flaky, short, without overworking it.
Okay.
We're also adding some apple cider vinegar to the water that you use to mix the dough up. That also helps to keep it short. The acid really stops it from becoming kind of overworked and gummy.
Okay.
And also, when you're doing that sort of kind of like laminations, it means that you're getting a really well-structured dough without, again, kneading it all the time. This is also a much wetter dough than an English short crust pastry. So again, easier to work with. You're not kind of kneading it as much.
Does it make any difference that I have used a mixer to mix the butter and flour?
No, I think in general it's best to do it by hand.
Okay.
That could be, if you're leaving it, for a long time, that could be where it ends up getting overworked.
Okay.
I wouldn't have said so, but again, with pastry, just pulsing it in the mixer is always better if you're going to do it in a mixer or a food processor. Sometimes I make it in the food processor.
Yeah.
Just want to pulse it until it's like breadcrumbs. You don't want to leave it going for ages.
Okay, well which is probably what I've done.
Yeah,
and food processor. Okay, so just a lack of knowledge.
Yeah,
really.
yeah, well.
Okay. Yeah, well, yeah, that's why we're here. We're learning. So, and with pastry, if someone wanted to make this recipe, then you could pastry can be the make ahead bit, can't it?
You could make this weeks in advance and put it in the freezer. You know, the pastry bit, that can, you make that, you get it in your tart case, get it in the freezer, then you can just pull it out when you're ready to bake. Even going all the way up to almost the last step, you could make the Frangipane tart essentially and leave that in the freezer for a week, and then when you're ready to put it all together, you just need to defrost it thoroughly, and then you add the ice cream and the meringue, so
cool.
You don't actually need to do it all on the day. You could do bit of it the day before, you could do it the week before. You can go quite far back with it,
Oh, brilliant. Okay, well, I know you need to start making your pastry, so what's the starting point here?
So first off, it's flour and butter.
Okay.
I like to use salted butter rather than unsalted.
Okay.
For me, it always needs seasoning, sweet things.
Do you need a knife?
I do, thank you. I'm just going to get my recipe up.
This does take me back, I must admit, to school years when I was taught the whole fingertip jobby, because we made, crumble at school and stuff like that. Who really ever came up with that?
It's just one of those things. It's almost like, because it's always been done that way, we just kept doing it that way. I'm not saying that way doesn't work, especially, they talk all the time about keeping stuff cold,
Yeah.
I never really understood it, because it's going back in the fridge anyway. So as long as it's workable for you, if it gets, really warm and melted, it's going to be quite difficult to work with it. But as long as it's workable for you, because it's getting a big long rest in the fridge anyway, why does it need to be cold right at the start? Especially for this style of pastry, where it's essentially just a pimped up short crust.
Nice. So let me just take people through so they know what you're doing.
Yeah.
So you've got your bowl on the scales, and the first thing you've done is just chop up some butter that's gone into it. So how much butter have we got?
150 grams of salted butter.
Okay. So that's just cut into chunks, so it's easier for you to start mixing it.
Yeah.
And now
then
the flour.
250 grams.
And you're using all-purpose flour.
I am, yeah. I find all-purpose is really, really good for this sort of pastry, because it's quite extensible, so it's got a nice stretch to it. So when you're kind of trying to do the couple of laminations that we're going to do, it's not putting up a fight with you or anything like that. It's quite easy to work with, and it doesn't then shrink back too much in the tart tin.
If someone can't find a purpose flour, in this country, could they use plain flour?
Yeah, plain will be fine. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And then I'm just, can I have a teaspoon as well, please? I'm just going to add a couple of teaspoons.
I'm basically here just to get all the things you need from around my kitchen. So you've got a teaspoon of sugar going into the pastry now?
Yeah.
Okay.
And that should be fine. If you're not using salted butter, then this would be the point to add a little sprinkle of salt, just fine salt. But that's why I like using salted butter, because it just takes that out of it.
Okay, cool.
And now that's all together. So just going to start rubbing the fat into the flour.
Do you have any particular tips for this?
Not massively. I mean, you're just kind of literally pinching it, rubbing it through. Like I said, for this sort of style of pastry, you want a couple of flakes of butter left in it. We'll see when it's done, but you don't want it to be fine breadcrumbs like it normally is. So you can take this a little bit too far, but even if you do, it will be fine, because the laminations really help to keep it flaky.
So really, it's all about the fingertips, isn't it?
Yes.
And just rubbing the butter into the flour, or the flour into the butter, until it breaks up into smaller pieces.
A bit of patience. That's why I quite like this recipe for as we get into Christmas. When it starts to get dark outside and it's the colder months, it's quite nice to get in the kitchen and take a time with something. Yeah. Having a moment to yourself when you're hosting everyone all the time, or you're running around seeing people. It's quite nice just to get alone, have some quiet time, and spend some time very therapeutically rubbing fat into flour. Yeah,
I hear you. And is this as well, do you subscribe to the need to be having cool hands?
No, I do. If I appreciate the requirement for cooler temperatures for making things like puff pastry, even rough puff pastry, you do want to keep things cooler, because in that you're relying on the butter staying cool to give you the rise. Because in short crust we're not looking for rise, there's no need for you to be trying to keep everything ice cold all the time. I just like to kind of work at room temperature because, again, like I said, it just all goes, this pastry is all going to go into the fridge for a big rest anyway. So as long as it's not melted, it's fine.
And this is becoming, you get to the point where it looks like a crumble mix.
Yeah, that's exactly it. So you can see there's some like larger clumps in there, which will turn into flakes of butter. But it's exactly like a crumble mix. That's quite right. So that's done. So
it's okay that you've got a few extra lumps in there.
Yeah, that's what you want. That's what you want. For this one.
Okay.
Unlike with traditional English short crust where you want it very, very fine. You actually want the lumps in this because it's going to help to keep it really nice and kind of flaky and tender. From here, can I have a jug, please, with about 100 mils of water in it?
Okay.
Thank you.
Keeping me busy. Can you measure it, or you need me to use a measuring jug?
No, I'll measure it. That's fine.
Okay.
Lucky hands, I can't make
I can do it.
Oh, thanks.
Oh, she says.
I've already
Buttery hands trying to open a lid. All right, David, you've got a job. We need David to open the bottle for us.
Oh, there we go.
There we go. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I've always got cream on my hands, so I can never do anything.
So,
no excuse.
What I'm then going to do is weigh out into this bowl directly over the butter and flour and sugar is 100 grams of water.
It always amazes me how the tiny amount of water that you need for making pastry.
It is, and this is quite a lot for pastry. Normally pastry is, I mean, you literally bring it together with about a teaspoon of water. With this American method, it's much more.
And tell us again then, what does adding apple cider vinegar do to it?
So the acid basically prevents the gluten from forming too strong of a bond, which helps to then keep your...
No, I was going to take
that one. Which helps to keep the pastry short. So that's
does that work with any vinegar, or you just prefer to use apple cider vinegar?
I prefer to use apple cider because I think you don't get much flavour from it, but the flavour is more in keeping with sort of desserts and things.
So I mean, I can smell that. It's quite strong.
Don't use malt vinegar, but you could use white vinegar.
So you are going to taste that a little bit in there, are you?
You probably won't. You probably won't. But I just prefer to use something that if you ever were to taste it, it's in keeping at least with the product.
So you're going to go in with a knife first
just
to start mixing
this? Table knife just to start kind of combining it all together. We should end up with actually quite a soft pastry dough, and when it's got to a point where it's all clumped together, I'll tip it out onto the counter and just bring it into a ball. But that's quite an old trick as well, to cut. You know, you were always told, oh, cut your butter into the flour and cut the pastry. I guess it does work, but there's not much reason why you couldn't just do this with a spatula.
Yeah.
So you can see in there, you've still got some
you
quite
can
large
still see some big clumps of butter in it. Okay.
Which is perfect.
So you're going to go in initially with the knife and then go in with your hands?
Yeah, I'm just going to tip it out. It's pretty much together except for a few crumbs at the bottom. Tip that out and just, it's quite a soft dough. So you don't want to knead it too much because you obviously still want those clumps of butter to be present. You don't want to kind of smush them too much. But
so basically, very quick. I mean, that's taken hardly much effort at all.
Yeah.
To just knead it gently and bring it together into a pastry.
Exactly, and it's much softer.
It is. So you're making indents in
pastry.
It. Yeah.
From here, what I'm going to do is just sprinkle the counter with a little bit of extra flour. You do need to do this with this one because it's a softer pastry than you probably be used to. So the key is just keeping it floured, and then I'm just going to roll it out to. I normally aim for about the thickness of kind of a couple of pound coins stacked on top of each other. Okay. You don't really need to be too precise with it, but You're just basically rolling it to...
So you're not picking up and turning the pastry, you're moving the rolling pin round.
Yeah, it's just too soft of a dough at this point, because
Okay.
because we've not chilled it in the fridge yet. You don't want to be trying to kind of manipulate it too much. Save all of that for when it's
Hang on, so you've
chilled.
rolled it into a rectangle.
Big rectangle.
Yeah, and then you're going to fold it.
I'm going to fold it like a letter, so 1/3 down from the top, 1/3 up from the bottom. So it's folded like a letter, and then I'll turn it and make sure that it's still got flour underneath it.
And this is what lamination is,
Yes,
the
it's
folding.
lamination, yeah.
And the lamination creates...
Well, normally when you do puff pastry, when you've got layers of butter and dough, the lamination is what creates rise. In this pastry, we are doing that to an extent, but because there's no real distinction between the butter and the dough except the small clumps of butter, really we're creating kind of almost like a hybrid between a flaky pastry and a short crust pastry.
Okay.
I've only really started doing this method recently because I was looking into it for an American recipe that I was doing, but I found that I just preferred to work with it than English.
Okay, so you've rolled it to another rectangle, and then you're going to fold it
the
again.
same again, yeah.
So top to the
Top
down,
to the middle,
bottom
and then
up.
bottom up, and
So
then
you've got a nice folded parcel.
yeah, and we're going to do that just one more time.
Okay.
And you can feel the dough is getting a bit more firm.
Yeah, you can
As I
see
do
it
this,
as
you
you're
know?
working with it.
It's not as soft and kind of like squashy.
You make it look so easy.
It is easy, this one. But I don't know, when I've been working with it recently for this project, I just found I got better results than with an English short crust pastry. But obviously, it depends on what your aim is. What are you looking for out of your pastry?
So Sophie's just done another set of folds on it then.
And that's
So
it.
we've got a nice little parcel, and you're going to leave it like that.
Yeah, just like that, and it will go in the fridge to chill. Oh,
Right.
no, sorry. It's going to go in the tin.
Okay.
Take that again.
Sorry.
So we've just got a nice little parcel then again in front of us.
Yes, correct. I'm just going to roll this out now, and it's going to go in the tin, and then that's all going to go in the fridge.
Right. Okay. Cool. Okay. It's just made it so quickly.
It doesn't take long. You really want to make sure though, as you roll this out, that you're keeping it moving and keeping it floured underneath.
Okay. So you're moving this one around
I am
the table
now,
a bit.
yeah. Now
Okay.
that it's come together a bit more and it's firmer, you just
Yeah.
want to make sure that it's not going to get stuck. Because if it does, then it will be a bit of a mess.
So you could use this pastry as your version of short crust.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
And I would recommend it, anyone who's really struggled with pastry before, it's a bit more forgiving
Right.
than
Okay.
like traditional English short crust.
So you mean I could do it?
No, I don't think so.
So we've got a
just
nice
gotta make sure
big
it's-
circle of lovely looking pastry.
Yeah, just make sure it's floured
Extra
well.
flour on the
Yeah.
surface on a regular basis.
Yeah. It's more just, it's just a pain if it gets stuck, but you won't suffer from having too much flour under it,
It's not
Don't
going to
impact the
disturb
quality.
the. Okay. It's not going to affect like the balance of it or
No.
anything. Okay.
No.
Would you use this kind of pastry for your mince pies?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
This would be a really nice pastry for mince pies. Quite often I make my own mince pies and I put a bit of cheese in the pastry. Instead of butter, I put a little, it's about 80% butter and then the 20% is
What,
cheddar
like a
cheese.
sharp cheese?
Yeah, like really
Oh,
sharp
wow.
cheddar.
Cool.
And I put that in my pastry because I quite like the mix of sweet and savoury.
Yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, but that's no different from, it's like a chutney.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, mincemeat is
Mincemeat
like
is
chutney.
so much like a chutney, yeah.
Yeah,
So
cheese and chutney, that makes sense to
Exactly,
me. I've
yeah.
never heard that before.
I also do, make cheese on toast with my panettone as well.
Yes, I'm
So
totally with you on that one.
that's-
Anything kind of fruit loafy, I
Yeah.
want the cheese.
Yeah, so that's rolled out to about the thickness that I want now. So I've got my tart tin, which has got flour in it, but this is a 23 centimetre.
So Sophie has got this lovely big square of pastry that she's now lifting up onto the rolling pin to be able to then
Drape it into the tart
drape
tin.
it over your tin.
and you just want to be careful to be gentle with it at this point.
So you're just using your knuckles just to push it in a little bit?
Yeah, you just lift it and kind of push it down into the corners. And then what we're going to do is trim it, but not trim it all the way, because I want it to rest in the fridge with a little bit of excess,
right?
Which will firstly give you a bit of a buffer, because as it rests it will shrink back a tiny bit, but also it just means when it's fully kind of set in the fridge, the pastry, you're able to really push it into the indents of the tin without it breaking or becoming too thin. But I do like to trim a little bit off just so it's not weighed down too much.
So you're just gently using your knuckles just to push it into the corners a little bit?
Yeah, literally just in the corners, not really into the fluting, around the edge of the tin at all.
So you've used a fluted tin for this, but it doesn't have to be.
No, it doesn't even have to be round. You could do this in a tray baked tin if you wanted to. If you're feeding a lot of people, it's sometimes much easier you get the kind of really long rectangular patisserie tins. Yeah. If I'm having a lot of people around for Christmas, I would do it in one of those, and that way you can cut slices straight across, much easier. So what I'm going to do now is, if you've got like a knife or scissors or something, I'm just going to trim off, trim off a lot of the excess until you've got just over about an inch left.
Alright, so it's still draping over the sides, and you're letting it drape right over that much. Okay.
I just want enough off so that it's not being dragged down and it's not difficult to get it in and out of the fridge. But you want to still have some left so that you can adjust as you press it in a little bit more. But this does create some offcuts, and what you can do with these offcuts is you could make them into mince pies, you could make them into little jam tarts, you could do little biscuit, like sometimes I roll pastry like this out and just top it with a bit of grated cheese, and you've got little cheesy biscuits then, that's fine.
Well, my grandmother, when she used to make mince pies, there was always a bit left, and she just used to roll it up with a bit of jam and bake that, and that was your extra bit.
Exactly. So that's it for the time being. It's just going to go in the fridge.
So we've got the pastry case full of pastry. It's just going to go in the fridge and cool. And how long would you leave it in the fridge for?
Ideally about half an hour.
Okay.
You want to leave it in the fridge.
But
if you can do a bit longer, that's
stick it
fine.
on a plate.
You could even you could do this bit and even just put it in the fridge overnight. It doesn't have to go in the freezer. You know, if you were doing.
So it doesn't need to be covered. It's just going in the fridge like that.
Yeah, that's perfect. Oh, thank you.
Pastry case is going in the fridge, and we'll find some space for it to be in the fridge.
Here we go.
Pastry's in the fridge.
Yeah.
What do we need to do next?
So this is a good time to prep the plums that are going to go on top of the Frangipane.
Yeah.
I was just saying before, even without the ice cream and the meringue, this makes quite a nice dessert just as it is.
Well, yeah.
So if you've not got that much of a sweet tooth, it's probably a good way to split it off there. But essentially, the pastry case is going to be filled with the Damson Jam and then the Frangipane, and then it has the plums sitting on top. So you want them to look nice. So basically, what you want to do is half them and take the core out, and then split them into eighths so that you can put them nicely kind of facing upwards across the whole dish.
And have you got a particular choice of plum that you prefer to use?
No, I think the darker colour that they are, the better for this sort of recipe. I prefer to eat the green, plums, but for this recipe it looks quite nice when you've got the bright purple skin.
And it all starts to feel a bit festive, doesn't it?
Yeah, for sure, and they don't need to be particularly ripe as well. I will say that. Plums quite often, they taste amazing even if they're not that ripe.
But especially if you're going to cook them.
Yeah, you're going to cook them, so you don't want them to be too squishy when you first put them on, but also it will help to keep the dessert, that sharpness that you want.
Yeah.
So much nicer to eat if they're actually a little bit firm.
I've got a recipe in my new book which is a sweet focaccia, which is made with an enriched dough and with plums on the top. Nice. And you get that scenario where you've pushed the plums into it and it bakes. It's that bit of the bread underneath that's so nice. It tastes as if you've added almost like
like jammy,
a custardy bit to it when you haven't.
Yeah.
It's like the best bit of it to be.
Yeah.
And because of writing the recipes and doing it during the winter, or there was a time when there wasn't many plums around, and the plums that I had to use, some of them were not very ripe.
Yeah.
Because of the time of year, and I just couldn't get them to ripen. And actually, but then when baking them, the roasting made them sweeter anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
So it worked.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Plums also, for me, I found that they're not a fruit in particular where the flavour doesn't appear right until they're ripe. They're quite flavoursome even when they're unripe. They're just quite tart. But that works best for this because you want that sharpness, otherwise it's all a bit sweet.
My husband likes to bring plums home with him on many occasions from work, so he'll come home and there's plums coming out the bag.
Yeah.
So we get a lot of battered plums.
Yeah.
All right, I'll leave it to it.
So we're just gonna halve these and then take the cores out. So you just kind of run the knife all the way around the edge and then you can twist it open.
Right, and take out the
just
stone.
pop the stone out with your thumb.
For those of you that are keen of hearing, you can hear Bob walking around the kitchen, tip-tapping on the floor, because he's looking for anything that's been dropped. He's already licked up any leftover flour that's come flying off the table. I can't imagine is that pleasant.
He's helping with hoovering.
Yeah, he is, which is why he's also just drunk litres of water. I think there's just nothing nicer than roasted. I love roasted fruit anyway, but roasted stone fruits I think are lovely.
I like to have roasted.
That's why I wanted it as one of my recipes.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, you add a sweetness. I just think you bring out such nice flavour.
Yeah.
We're starting to hope that Bob will eventually settle, but he's finding it all far too interesting.
So they're all halved. I'm just going to also take off any of the stems that are still there. And then you just want to kind of cut each half in half and then each half in half again. So you end up with
so you've got some nice little slices.
8 little wedges of plum.
So Frangipane, my understanding is that's almond.
Yes.
So you're using almond flour
ground
or ground almonds?
Yeah, ground almonds, which also means that it stays moist for quite a long time.
Okay.
So particularly good if you want to make this bit the day before, it will, or even a couple of days before, it will keep really well.
Okay.
Also, if you're going to make it and freeze it, it will help retain the moisture really well, even through freezing and defrosting.
I've never made Frangipane, so what goes into Frangipane?
Frangipane is almond, ground almonds. It's butter, it's flour, sugar, eggs. There's no raising agent in it. It's quite a dense sort of cake.
Okay.
Sometimes traditionally you'd add almond essence or almond oil as well to it, but I like to put, in this one, orange zest and some spices as well, just to kind of festive it up. Okay. I'm also not a fan of an artificial kind of almond flavour, so for Christmas I really hate marzipan and cinnamon and everything like that. I don't like it, so I prefer to make my Frangipane just with the fresh kind of ground almonds rather than adding in any sort of essences.
I don't do marzipan.
But otherwise it's pretty traditional sort of cake mix. You just mix it up, creaming the butter and sugar together and then add the rest of it in.
Okay, so Frangipane is basically a cake.
Yeah.
Because you can make cakes with just the Frangipane mix, like tray bakes.
Yeah. And they, like I said, they keep so well. So if I'm making cakes for people, make cakes for friends who are unwell or something, or family or whatever, quite often would do Frangipane cakes because they just keep for such a long time, so there's no pressure to kind of eat it all on the same day. What
makes them keep so well then?
The ground almonds just helps to retain a lot of moisture. Just for the mealy texture that they are. So it's really, really good for keeping it moist, stopping it from going stale. Nice.
So it's a good thing to put in other things then?
Yeah. A lot of cakes, if you want them to keep, you can just add a couple of tablespoons of ground almonds. You have to compensate and add a bit more liquid, but it helps them to keep really nicely. Yeah.
You wouldn't take out a couple of spoonfuls of flour to replace it with ground almonds?
You could do, but then you have to think about the flour is also adding to that cake for its properties. So if you take out all of the flour and you end up with lots of ground almonds, it'll be very moist, but it won't hold its shape. So if you cut a slice, it'll crumble. So you have to weigh up that balance, especially if you're using a self-raising flour. If you take some of that flour out and put more ground almonds in, the cake won't rise as much. So you have to kind of think about what the flour is also adding to it.
I must admit, I've had people asking me about making sourdough with just almond flour or ground almonds. You're never going to be nice. I mean, you would need so much to help it bind and do something. You'd have to bake it in a tin. It's quite a difficult thing to do. if you adding it to something, sure.
That's it, yeah.
Yeah, but not to try and use it 100%.
It's got such nice properties as an additional ingredient.
Yeah.
I am not a massive fan of using it solo, except for a few very specific.
Yeah, I think if you were going to try doing it, like you say, as a cake, if you were adding some eggs or something to it, but trying to make just...
Yeah.
I had someone recently wanted to try and make sourdough 100% with almond flour. Yeah, anyway.
I can't imagine it was that tasty.
Okay, do you want me to get rid of this?
Yeah, sure, yeah, so they're done for
Plums
now,
are all
so
chopped up and
leave
done.
those be.
Okay.
And then we can just also zest the oranges that we need for the Frangipane as well. So it's just a good idea while the pastry's chilling, just to get the rest of these kind of little jobs done. That's a nice bowl.
All of my bowls are beautiful.
Yeah, I know, they're
It's
very
all been
nice.
handmade by the fabulous Jill at Sitch Farm, who currently now, very excitingly, has our products in Fortnum and Mason
Oh my
in central
gosh.
London. It's really mega.
I love Fortnum and Mason. Great
So
space to go for Christmas as well.
Oh, lovely.
Christmas shopping in Fortnum and Mason.
Just to go and look round and see their decorations. Last year they had, did you go see the bouncing puddings?
Yes.
They had Christmas puddings, which were on wires. They've got a big atrium in the middle in Fortnum and Mason. They had Christmas puddings on wires, and it had an electronic piece at the top that moved. They could pull the wires up and down. So you basically had dancing Christmas puddings, and it was different music, wasn't
Yeah,
it? So
yeah.
there would be some coming up and some coming down, and they'd all drop and they'd all go up again. And I stood there far too long watching it. I'm not too sure that my husband was that enamoured. But it's just the decorations. I think
Yeah.
going to Fortnum's at Christmas is just part of a tradition, really.
Yeah, and I like buying little foodie presents from there because people would never normally buy it for themselves. You know, you would not go and buy your lemon curd from Fortnum and Mason, but it's quite nice to buy people something special.
Oh, my grandmother always wanted biscuits from Fortnum's so
The
that
tea
she could
is
have
great.
the tin.
Yeah.
And the tea only so that when her friends came round that she could get them the tins out to just impress everybody. Yes.
So I am just using a couple of oranges for this, but if you had lots of clementines or you know, mini like easy peelers and stuff, you could get them around at Christmas all the time, you could use a couple of those. And then you can, if you know, you just eat the orange afterwards, but you can slice it. I like to do dried orange decorations.
Yeah.
So you just slice them up, not too thin, but also not too thick, about the thickness of a pound coin. And then I dehydrate them either in the oven overnight or in my air fryer.
Yeah.
It has a dehydrator setting. And then you just string them up and they look so nice.
Or even easier once they're done like this, push a load of cloves.
Yeah, yeah.
So stuff cloves, push cloves into
Yeah.
the skin of the orange to make decorations. They smell amazing.
Yeah. Or you can do, you can also, if you want your house to smell lovely, I mean, it will smell nice anyway, but you can, if you're not going to use them or eat them, you can slice them up and just simmer them in a pot for 20 minutes, and then with a bit of water, it just makes your house smell so nice.
I get a feeling Christmas is probably lovely in your house.
I love Christmas. It's one of my favourite times. I love Christmas.
I don't think I've ever seen such perfectly, beautifully zested oranges. I mean, look at that. It's
Oh, that's
virtually
lovely.
still round.
Yeah, well, you don't want to get any of the pith underneath because that's the bitter part. So quite important to be gentle and methodical, otherwise you'll end up with too much of the pith, which is the white bit underneath the zest, which doesn't taste that nice.
I mean, this is dedication here with all the bits and pieces that you're doing, which, I mean, to me is a joy.
Yeah. And again, you know, you don't need to, you can add in, if you don't want to do this or you don't have time to do it, you can leave it out, or you can add in a bit of orange oil, anything like that. But again, it's quite nice at Christmas, you know, if you want to make this dessert for your Christmas table, to spend the time, you know, working on it and put the love into it, because it does make a difference at the end when you've got this beautiful tart. You know, it looks so nice, it tastes amazing, and everyone always remembers it then after that. You know, they remember the dessert being amazing at Christmas because it's kind of, well, you just never stop eating, do you?
Well, you see, we might disappoint you because we don't have dessert in this house. We never have room for it, so we never really get round to it. We will make sure there is dessert in the house if there's certain people visiting that require dessert.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we never get around to eating
You
desserts.
know, we used to always go to my grandparents for Christmas, and my grandma she would do like 4 or 5 different desserts for the Christmas table, and there would always be a Christmas pudding, even though only about 3 of us like it. There would always be a cheesecake, especially since I got married, because my husband loves passion fruit cheesecake, or he said he did once, and she never let that go, and had to make it every single time.
Right.
There's always this boozy chocolate thing, which I don't like alcohol in my food, so I never like that one, but it's like a sherry sort of chocolatey cake.
Okay.
And something else, but there was always custard, and my cousin and I used to fight over who would get the skin on top of the custard, because I think it's the best bit.
It sounds like my mother-in-law's table. For every roast, every weekend, there would always be 3 different desserts.
Yeah.
And Graham would just have, my husband would have all 3.
Yeah.
All in the
A
same
bit of
bowl.
everything. Yeah. Oh, there'd always be a panna cotta as well, but made in an old ice cream tub.
Wow.
So they're zested, that's done. So what
We have a lovely little bowl, a beautiful orange zest.
It smells nice too.
Smells amazing.
And then we can get the Frangipane started.
Right.
So I like to make the Frangipane in the mixer, but you can do it just kind of
Okay,
by hand
so
if
I've
you
got the KitchenAid out for this one.
Yeah.
Okay.
So my Frangipane, it starts out with creaming together butter and sugar.
Yeah.
And it's 100 grams of butter and then 125 grams of sugar.
Okay.
So just the same salt of butter I was using earlier.
Okay.
I need to get my hand to block out. Yeah. Oh, no, that's just
Yeah,
about
that'll
right.
be right.
Yeah, that's fine.
So we've got 100 grams of butter, and this is going in the pot to go on the mixer, and the bowl for the mixer.
And then 125 grams of just caster sugar. You could use golden caster sugar if you want. I just wanted to use up what I had in the cupboard.
Okay, and that's going to go on the mixer.
Yeah. Just sort of a medium speed for a couple of minutes until it's really light and fluffy.
Okay. So we're in the mixer and we're just giving it a turn to mix the sugar and the butter together. Creaming is the proper term.
Yes.
Creaming sugar and butter, as I remember.
It's quite important with Frangipane to cream the butter and sugar rather than doing the all-in-one method,
Right.
which is where you just chuck everything in together, because there's no raising agent in Frangipane apart from eggs. You know, we don't even whisk the eggs, so you want
the air
the
from
air.
this.
So just leave the mixer handle there, but you've got the butter and sugar in there that's nice and light and pale now.
Gosh,
fluffy.
there's not a lot, is there?
No, not very
Okay.
much. No, because this is just one layer of quite a multi-layered dessert. You don't actually need that much Frangipane, but also just doesn't take that much sugar really to sweeten it up. The only thing we want to do now really is, before we make the rest of the Frangipane, is to preheat the oven.
Okay.
So we want it on about 180 Celsius.
Okay. Yeah.
And preferably with a baking tray in it, heating at the same time.
So about 350 Fahrenheit.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Have you ever tried baking it for cold?
I haven't.
You should try it.
Well, maybe we will. For this one, we'll go. But the point of the baking tray, and actually where preheating comes to the advantage here, is that because we don't blind bake this pastry case, you want the baking tray to be hot when it goes into the oven,
So it's giving
so
it a
it's
base.
immediately baking the base, making sure that it's not soggy.
Okay. What I should really do is use one of the baking trays I got sent that doesn't warp.
Which ones don't warp?
They're ones that are made by Nordic Ware because they've got
Anti-warping technology.
I can't think of it. They've got metal rods in them that hold the shape. I'll have to show you. They're really nice silver
that's
ones
good.
actually.
So I'm just going to use a spatula to scrape all of that butter and sugar down, just so it's not
So you're not worried about that?
No,
You've
no,
still
no.
got some on the spatula.
It's all on the mixer there because it's going to go back in that mixer, but I just don't want it all stuck up the sides because that won't.
Oh, okay. So the
great.
bit that's left on the thing is all
It's
going to
all
go
gonna
back
end
in.
up back in there, yeah.
All right.
To this, I'm going to add our orange zest.
So the orange zest is going in
Yeah.
with the creamed butter and sugar.
Yeah, I've used quite a lot, but I
Yeah.
like it quite orangey, but it doesn't
Yeah.
have to be that orangey
Okay.
if it's not the preference. I'm also adding about a teaspoon of vanilla bean paste.
Okay.
And then I'm going to add also, again, about a teaspoon of ground cinnamon,
Yeah.
slightly shy. And then another about half a teaspoon of, this is just mixed spice.
So for everyone that's going to ask, the mixed spice in this country includes cinnamon, coriander seed, nutmeg, clove, pimento and ginger.
Yeah.
So if it's not something that you have on your shelves, you can create a mix of it, which you'll find a recipe online.
Yeah, or you could just use any spice that you like. You know, the whole point of this is just that it makes a nice spiced frangipane. But if you didn't have mixed spice, you could just use a little bit of nutmeg, or just cinnamon,
Yeah,
or a little
and
bit of clove.
create the same
you know,
kind of thing.
Just want something kind of warming and
Yeah.
festive.
But not
Not
allspice.
No,
necessarily
allspice is a different
spice.
thing.
Yeah.
Allspice is an actual.
But I sometimes think people confuse the two.
Yeah.
Maybe
no.
you should make that point.
Yeah.
Bless you. I'm going to save those sneezes.
Okay.
Excuse me. Yes.
But what we're talking about here is mixed spice as opposed to allspice, which
Yeah.
is a spice on its own.
Yeah.
Which
Allspice.
is a pepper,
Yeah.
as opposed to mixed spice. This is a mix of spices.
So don't get them mixed up. Allspice is a lovely flavour, and you could put a pinch of allspice in this if you wanted to.
Yeah.
But don't add half a teaspoon of allspice.
No, because that's a
very
strong thing. Okay, so they're two separate things.
So to that then, I am also going to add 2 eggs. Doesn't matter the size.
No,
I know you're going to ask.
Got 2 eggs going into our mix.
And then before I add in the flour and the ground almonds, I'm just going to get that back on for another mix. In the kitchen.
Okay. So, ooh, it smells so nice. So that bit at the moment, you're just going to give that a short mix
Yeah.
and then start adding the rest in.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah. So we're back on your mixer. All right, so that was on for 2 or 3 minutes.
Yeah.
And you actually got to a point where you turned it up quite high.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's going to look a bit curdled, and that's why I turned it up quite high, is because when you're mixing butter and eggs, you really want the size of the kind of butter particles almost to break down considerably, so they're nice and small, so that they are
It does look a
suspended
bit
within-
curdled, doesn't it?
Yeah, which is fine. It's all part of the process, and as you add the flour and the almonds, it will all come back to where it was. But it's
Okay.
essentially a game of temperatures. You know, the butter is cooler than the egg, and therefore it splits apart.
Okay.
But we're done with the KitchenAid now for this bit. So
Okay.
I like to add the flour and the ground almonds by hand, just so that you don't overmix them, and that way you can make sure it's all nicely incorporated.
Other mixers are available.
They are. It's not very much flour for this, it's just 50 grams.
Okay, so we're back on the scales, adding 50 grams of the all-purpose flour.
And then it's 175 of ground almonds.
Okay. I'm such an almond fan.
Yeah.
The
Yeah,
whole
me too.
Frangipane thing has always smelled so good.
Yeah.
That's why I'm surprised I don't like marzipan.
Me too, but I think almond flavour and almond flavour are so different. You know, real almonds to me don't taste much like almond flavour. But I'm the same, I just hate any of that marzipan or anything like that. It's just disgusting to me, but I love proper almonds.
So we've got 175 grams of ground almonds that have gone in.
Yep, And now I'm just going to fold it all together.
So you're using the spatula just to fold it?
Yes.
And just because I recently watched the clip again on Schitt's Creek about folding.
Folding the cheese.
Folding it. What does fold mean exactly?
You're basically kind of stirring it through but without beating it.
Right.
So it's called folding because you're basically coming under something and folding it over to incorporate whatever it is you're trying to incorporate.
So the action tends to be, doesn't it? You cut down the middle with your spatula, go round and turn it over.
Exactly. Cut down through, go round. And you end up with actually a very stiff sort of cake mix.
Yeah.
That's exactly what you want. Frangipane is quite stiff. It's not pourable cake mix.
Right.
It's one that you kind of spread out. And that's what gives you the really nice sort of dense.
It is like a paste, isn't it?
Yeah,
Okay.
dense and delicious sort of cake.
Bob's come back to discover whatever he can on the floor, so that's what you can hear.
And that's the Frangipane done for the time being. So what we need to do next is get the tart tin out of the fridge and trim it properly, and then we can start assembling it.
Ooh, okay.
Right, cool.
I'm just going to get some things out of the way so people can see if they're watching. Just move it to the side a bit. Okay. Oh, don't worry about that.
Are you sure?
Yeah, it's only just because there was some pots there. Okay.
So this is done. It's nice and chilled.
Hang on, I'm not recording. Sorry. Let me start. Okay, we are now.
So this has been in the fridge, what, about half an hour?
Yeah, so the pastry's really firmed up.
Yeah, really firmed
But really
up.
interesting, you can see how much some of it's shrunk.
Yes, pulled straight back in, which is why I don't like to trim it completely before that. What I'm just going to do before I do anything else is just go around and use my sort of, I suppose that's the shin of your finger, isn't it? To push the pastry into each one of the flutes.
Okay.
You could use a rolling pin, not rolling pin, a wooden spoon for this as well, if you want to, but it doesn't need to be perfect. You know, you're not trying to kind of, it will all settle in eventually. You just want to make sure that it's all in the gaps.
So just basically using your fingers to push pastry into the fluting shape.
Exactly. Plus that way you know how much you can trim.
Okay.
So now that that's all in like that, I can trim this pastry case.
Right.
If I was going to be blind baking, I wouldn't trim this now. I would put this into blind bake
and then trim it off afterwards.
And then trim it with a serrated knife afterwards.
Okay.
When it's sort of about halfway through the blind bake. Blind baking does tend to cause pastry to shrink again.
Right.
Whereas if you're baking it with something in there, then you don't get that effect.
Okay.
For me, I like to trim it, I would roll my rolling pin over it.
Okay, so just rolling it over the top so it pushes it against the edges of the pan.
Exactly, but you could use a knife if you want to, but because my pan is fluted, using a knife doesn't always give you
oh wow, look at
the
that.
best effect.
Absolute perfection.
So there you have your pastry case.
Wow.
And I just like to go round again because I just rolled it. That's pushed the pastry down. So I just like to go round and just give it another quick.
Just like you've done it before.
Just like I have. I've made 1 or 2 tarts in my time. And I forgot to say at the start, this is a loose bottomed tart tin.
So you can push it up.
Which is much, much, much better. If you don't have a loose bottomed tart tin, I would really recommend getting one. And in particular, a heavy metal one, not one of the sort of grey ones. You want a really kind of almost like it's a heavy pan because that will conduct the heat better.
You want to look in TK Maxx this time of year?
Yeah, big time.
Do you need a spoon?
Yes, please. So I've got Damson Jam for the bottom of this. If you don't like Damson Jam, you could use any one you like. I like this one from Frangipane.
Do you want one that's a bit thicker set?
That's not too big of a problem. You want one that is going to have a really good flavour. That's what I would say. That's more important. And it's a couple of tablespoons, a couple of good tablespoons, which I think ends up being just over half a jar.
Okay. And just going to spread that into the bottom of the pastry case.
You don't want too much because if you have too much jam, it could end up bubbling out, which is fine, but it doesn't look that nice. And it's also a bit too sweet then. If you wanted to, if you found that this is a bit sweet, I do think you want a jam on the bottom, otherwise the frangipane can be a bit dry.
Yeah.
But what you can do is add your few tablespoons of jam to a bowl and then add in a squeeze of lemon, just to sharpen it up. Or if anyone does sort of beer making or wine making, you might have citric acid in the house, you can just add a little sprinkle of citric acid to it.
Which is basically like powdered lemon juice.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
So we've just got a nice thin layer of jam going in the bottom.
Yeah, so that's about enough there.
Okay.
It's really not very much, but just enough that it will give you a good flavour. And then, actually, yeah, can I have another spoon?
Yeah.
Pour that one again. Then what I like to do is put my frangipane in, and because it's quite thick, this frangipane.
You just want to dollop it, don't
Yeah, you want to dollop it, but start from the outside.
Surely if you were trying to just spread that in, you're just going to mix it up with the jam
Exactly,
and lose the
exactly.
layers.
So you want to dollop it in kind of evenly across the tart.
Okay.
But start from the outside, because you can always spread inwards, but it's quite difficult to spread outwards.
Okay. So you just tip central.
Well, you just pick these things up when you've baked enough stuff.
Yeah, that's true. When you have enough of these things going through your kitchen, it's second nature.
Exactly.
Oh, I feel the need for a frangipane sourdough.
That would be nice.
There must be some easy way of doing that.
That would be a good Christmas season. Good for Easter as well. I tend to make a lot of frangipane stuff for Easter for some reason. I suppose almonds are quite Eastery.
Yeah. It's all the flavours and the spices.
Yeah.
It's the best time of year for it.
Yeah. So now that I've gone all the way around the outside, I'm just kind of filling in where I see there are gaps.
Will you attempt to smooth that down a bit?
Yeah,
okay.
absolutely.
Sorry, we have the dog walking round and round and round in Forever Hopeful.
Aww.
It's given up now, I think.
That's how it is when I go into the mill to do my test baking. If Bertie's dog is there, she does not stop badgering me all day because she knows what I'm there to do.
I found it very interesting last time I was in the mill, and Bertie's dog is called Lola, which is
Luna.
beagle. Luna, even, sorry. And we came in from being outside, and I walked across the room to then go to the bathroom, which also goes to the canteen.
She shoot out the door.
Oh my gosh, I've never seen the dog move so fast, because she wanted to go and sniff around the canteen and see what people had dropped.
Luna is so naughty.
Oh,
she's so naughty.
I wasn't too sure what was going on, and then she charged across the floor.
You know, I made a couple of 100 scones for a charity thing for the local church to Matthew's, put them all on the table outside the test bakery, and she jumped up on the table and snaffled a load of them.
And she's a small dog.
She's not big. So that's all in the tin, so I'm just really gently going to use my
Just got a mini palette knife.
Yeah, best offset. So if you're going to invest in a little bit of equipment for your home kitchen, I always say you just need one or two of these, one in this size and then one in a slightly larger size.
Little palette knives.
Little palette knives, but always get them offset because they're so much more helpful that way. And there's nothing that you
Which
can't
means
do with
offset means the ones with a little step in.
Yes.
As opposed to just a straight flat palette knife.
Yeah. You want to make sure that you've not got any of the jam spilling out over the top here. So if you ever push it across and it pushes some of the jam up, just try and take some from a different area and
so
plug
cover it back over.
Yeah, plug that hole up.
Of course, not something you've done. She was the pro. Oh, that looks perfect.
So it didn't, you know, for what looked like a tiny amount of butter and sugar.
But it's
filled it perfectly.
what looks lovely as well is the orange speckled all the way through it.
Yeah. And this will taste really orangey, which is nice.
Orange and almond.
Yeah, exactly. It's like a match made in heaven, isn't it?
Yeah.
So that's all smoothed out nicely. It doesn't really matter if it's, you know, level or anything like that, because it will sort of self-level in the oven. And especially because what we're going to do now is put the plums on top.
Okay.
So you can do this any kind of design that you like. What I think looks nice is just going around with the skin side sort of up, so that you
all facing the same
yes,
way.
yeah.
To make
I
it
just
pretty.
think that looks nice. But also, if you're going to cover it with ice cream and meringue, you don't necessarily see this, but the perfectionist in me needs it to look very lovely, even though it gets covered up. But this is the part to pay attention to if you don't plan on using the ice cream and the meringue, because this will be the finished product then. So you want it to look amazing for the Christmas table.
So Sophie is just pushing the segments just gently into the frangipane.
Yeah.
Not pushing it down too heavily. It's
Not
just,
too much.
just
We might
gentle.
go back at the end and just give them another kind of tamp down, but you don't really need to for now.
Starving.
Got a little gap in the middle, so I've just cut one of our segments in half, and you can just kind of fill that in.
Okay, so we've just got them evenly spaced around.
Yeah, and then I'm just gonna
Push them in, just gently.
push them in a little, and then that's ready to bake.
Wow!
So
That looks amazing.
that needs to bake on the preheated oven dish, baking tray in the oven, and it's probably going to go for 40 minutes, maybe even slightly longer.
Okay.
Frangipane does take a little bit of time to bake all the way through, and because we don't have a blind baked pastry case, we want to make sure that that's really nice and crisp too.
Yeah.
But you know, this is time where you can go and do anything else.
Okay.
Okay.
Let me pull that out so, and here is that beautiful tart before it went in to be baked, and here is how it looked when it came out of the oven. Already perfect, just like that. We have the most beautiful tart in front of us, Sophie, that I would want to just cut into like that myself, I have to say, but you're about to pimp it.
Yes.
So,
For me, Christmas is all about maximalism, so I'm about to make this a maximalist dessert. But if you do want it as a minimalist
can I just say,
dessert...
never heard maximalist. I've heard minimalist, but never maximalist.
Oh, you want to come to my house? My house is maximalist. There's stuff everywhere.
Maximalist.
If you were going to keep it plain, before you put it in the oven, it's a good idea just to sprinkle it while it's unbaked, just with some caster sugar on top, because it helps it to really kind of shine.
Okay.
And then you could just dust it with icing sugar, and that's completely fine.
So you could serve it like
just serve it like that, and it would be very delicious.
The edging is just perfection. I mean, just
it
superstar
comes out very
stuff.
nice, yeah.
Yeah.
But I am going to top it with ice cream and then meringue to make it into a baked Alaska tart. So I've already got my ice cream setting in the freezer. I'm going to make the Swiss meringue, and I'm using Swiss meringue rather than French. For anyone who doesn't know, the meringue you might have made to make pavlova, that's French meringue, where you're just whisking raw egg whites, sugar, and then you bake it.
Right.
Swiss meringue is, you're essentially cooking it before it's set. So you're going to cook it a little bit over a bain-marie, which is a pot of simmering water, until it reaches a certain point, and that will cook the egg whites. Therefore, it's still malleable. You can pipe it, and then you just only need to put it either under the grill or with a blowtorch, and it's ready to eat. You don't actually have to cook it again. Also, Italian meringue is similar, but with Italian meringue, you're pouring a hot sugar syrup into whipping egg whites. So
I don't know how that doesn't just cook the egg whites. But...
It does, but you know, this is the point. But I prefer French meringue.
So
Swiss meringue.
Does this mean that we need a pot of boiling water?
We do need a pot of simmering water.
Would we need? Sorry.
This medium-sized one is fine.
Medium-sized pan.
Yeah. You don't want very much water or very much heat, really. You definitely don't want the bowl of your mixer to be touching too much the water, otherwise your curdling will cook the egg whites.
So what do you want? Just like
Just
an
like
inch
a
or
couple of
two?
inches of water, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Does that need to go on already?
Yes, please.
Okay.
So I am going to separate my eggs first. I'm going to use 4 egg whites for this, a tart of this size, which might leave us with a little bit extra, but you can always bake it in the oven as like little mini meringue nests or kisses or whatever you want to call them.
So I'm going to put this on the small burner just so that people can see it if they're watching on YouTube. Okay.
So just the egg whites straight into the bowl that you're going to mix it in.
At the same time, our little pinwheels are still baking a bit.
Just break that egg yolk. I'll just have to stick that out.
Do I need to get rid of that?
Yeah, please. I've just spit that egg yolk.
Right, we'll start again. We've got enough eggs.
Oh yeah.
Oh, I've got eggs as well.
I've got plenty of eggs. They smell good, that peanut butter.
Last time we used eggs on the podcast, we had a problem. Do you remember with
Did you?
Sophie Rushton Smith?
Oh, yeah,
Oh, how was that? Yeah.
she was frying eggs and she broke the fried egg.
Oh no.
David very nicely, kindly cut it out of the recorded.
You
I
would have left it in.
I left it on YouTube.
Yeah, you're right to. But the reason I cut it out was because you just heard Sophie go, "Oh, fuck!" and then she didn't really explain what she'd done. So
in which case, then that's still on YouTube, and maybe no one's watched
yeah,
it.
she didn't actually say
Yeah.
the F word. But
Yeah.
she was about to, I think.
Oh, Sophie, our pinwheels are looking good.
Yeah, they're starting to brown off, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. My
So I think
concern
they're not
is that
far.
the egg cups might be browning a bit much.
Yeah. We can always pull them out because they'll continue baking as they sit on the tray.
What do you think, teacher?
Yeah, I reckon they'll be fine.
Yeah, are you happy with the?
Yeah.
Woo!
They'll firm up as they sit there.
Okay. So I'm going to, shall I put them on a thing or just leave them on there?
You just leave them on the tray, yeah.
Okay. So just, because we should, just to be safe, just try just a little bit of this special pastry.
I'm going to burn your mouth.
That's part of it.
See, burnt hands I can handle, but a burnt mouth I cannot, because then you can't eat anything properly for ages. Has it worked?
You can taste the difference, actually. Yeah, I see what you mean. It's not like a typical short pastry.
No.
Oh, I haven't tried one with the egg cut yet. I'm not that stupid. I would just definitely burn my mouth then.
Yeah.
So how many eggs are you separating?
4.
How much mash are you making?
Quite a lot. A significant amount. There we go. 4 eggs.
See what my kitchen doesn't know what's hit it.
No. And then to that 4 eggs, let me just work out how much sugar I'm going to add. Yeah.
Sorry, is your...
I am going to add 270 grams of caster sugar. Just straight in to the unwhipped raw egg whites.
Okay. So all of these egg yolks,
Yeah.
how long would they keep in the fridge?
In the fridge, a couple of days. You can freeze them. What I tend to do if I have a lot of egg yolks left and I'm not going to be using them straight away is I will whip them together with a little bit of water and then keep them in a pot in the fridge, or sometimes in ice cube trays, because then you can defrost one and use it to glaze.
I tell you why I asked,
things.
because I've got to do a class soon with enriched dough, and they would be perfect.
Yeah,
So, but
absolutely.
I'm not going to need them therefore for another week.
Yeah. No, you
So if you freeze them,
they'll be fine. Yeah.
if I just put them in a pot like that and then froze them, would they defrost in the same way?
I think you want to beat them together.
Beat
so
them together.
label the pot with how many egg
Yeah.
yolks there are. But if you beat them together, you won't end up with any kind of gloopy.
Okay,
skin.
and then they would just go in a little pot and in the
Yeah,
freezer.
yeah.
Okay,
And
cool.
then just defrost. I normally just I have like those tiny Tupperwares, and I just put them in a mug of boiling water and defrost them that way.
Oh, okay. Or
or
could
just
you
leave
put
them
it
out,
in?
yeah.
Okay.
Let me just get my whisk and my thermometer.
Oh look, I might have to try one of these with some bits in.
So
This is why I don't make pastry. This is one of the reasons, because I like pastry a lot.
for this then, the next step is essentially, so I've got in here my sugar and my egg whites.
Yeah.
I'm going to mix those just until they're combined, and then we're going to put them over the pot of simmering water.
Okay.
I like to use a thermometer just to make sure, because the risk with this is if you don't heat them to a high enough temperature, they will hold their shape for a minute, and then you'll put them on what you want to put them on, and then it will drop and go runny again.
Right.
You need to do it, you need to keep them going on the pot of simmering water until they get to at least 70 degrees.
Right.
But another way you can tell if you don't have one of these is if you, after a while, if you put your finger in and just run it up the side, you shouldn't be able to feel any granular sugar, and it should be too hot for you to keep your finger in for an extended period of time.
Right.
If you've got those two things, it's probably fine.
But you're doing this in a stainless steel bowl.
Yes.
With a handle. Is that not going to get warm up to the handle?
It will, but it's not that warm. It's fine.
Okay.
It doesn't take that long. Sometimes if you're making this, because the next step of this will be, once it's hit that temperature, will be to whip it until it's cooled to room temperature. That can take a few minutes, so if you want to cut that time down, you can always heat it in a separate bowl and then pour it back into this one that's cold and ready to whip, and that will cut the temperature down. Sometimes I do that because I use this to make Swiss Meringue buttercream as well. So if I ever do wedding cakes, I normally always do Swiss Meringue buttercream, which is a buttercream sweetened with Swiss meringue, but obviously you need it to be cooled before you add the butter, otherwise the butter will melt. If I'm doing that, I'll do this bit in a different bowl than what I'm going to use to mix it, but for now it's fine.
This is a whole other world away from me.
First, you just literally want to mix it until it's combined.
So you're
like
just
that.
using a hand whisk and you're
Yeah.
starting to...
You want to kind of keep moving it around with the whisk, but the aim here is not necessarily to add any air to it. It's literally just to whisk it so that the egg whites don't settle and start cooking, before it's ready.
So we've got the pan, the bowl with the egg white mixture over the saucepan that's got some simmering water. Is it warm enough? Is it
Yeah.
Okay.
It'll take a few minutes just to get to the right temperature and start dissolving the sugar, but it's quicker than you think.
And will it start to change colour? Because at the moment...
No, it will stay pretty much like this, but it will get, whereas right now it's very thick and gloopy, it will be really runny when it's ready.
It will be runny?
Really runny. And then
So
when we
when
whip
does
it will get stiff peaks. Like
okay.
So this part of the process is literally only to cook the egg whites enough so that firstly you can eat them without baking it again in the oven, and secondly so that it holds its peak even after you've stopped whisking.
So here's a question. You're making a pavlova, which to me needs to be eaten pretty quickly, does it? What if you've got some left?
Some of this left, I would...
No. What if you've got
some
some...
pavlova left?
Yeah, so...
Raw or baked pavlova?
No, the tart you're making.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to have the ice cream on the top and then this on the top of that.
Yeah.
No way we're going to eat all of that between us today.
No, it just keep in the fridge.
So the ice cream wouldn't melt?
Oh, well, the freezer, I guess, yeah. Just keep it in the freezer, portion it out, put it in the freezer, it'll be absolutely fine. The meringue will last through that.
I mean,
this is ideally a dessert that would be all eaten in one go, but you can actually have it in the freezer.
So what if David wanted to take half of it home, as is the norm, will that just melt to a mess in
It
his
might
mouth?
well do, yeah.
Okay, so it needs to stay here, David.
You'll have to eat a piece before you leave, David. So you can see already it's getting much more runny.
Yeah.
And I can already feel that there's not as much sugar, not as many granules of sugar in there, but I'm going to use my thermometer to just see what temperature we're at. So we're already at 56, 57 degrees.
So that's a probe thermometer that you've got?
Yes. I just have one because I do a lot of this sort of stuff, but I would recommend investing in one because they're not very expensive. They're less than £10 on Amazon, and it means you can be quite precise with stuff like this, but there are ways to work around it,
Yeah.
people didn't used to have thermometers
Yeah,
that told them the temperature of food, and they would make this recipe. So
It used to be done by look and feel.
exactly,
didn't it?
and you can see it's so much more runny now because the sugar's dissolving. I can feel that there aren't any granules of sugar. So the next step would be that if you could put your finger in but not keep it in, it's probably warm enough.
I'm not going to offer. So thinness wise,
It's almost like about double cream now, whereas
it's looking
before,
like a starter that's much too thin and will not rise. So everybody that asks me about their starters that have problems is usually because they're too thin. Because they've been made too hot, very
So-
much like this.
we've just hit 71 degrees.
Okay.
So that is now hot enough.
Do you keep the water on or we
No,
turn it off?
that's it. We're done with the water now.
Okay.
So just giving that one more whisk with my hand whisk, and then I'm going to get it on the KitchenAid and turn the whisk on this for at high speed for probably about 5-10 minutes.
Sophie,
Yeah,
what we got?
we've got some very nice stiff and shiny meringue, which I would quite happily hold over both of our heads.
Yes, me
It's
too.
not going to drop.
That looks amazing.
Yes.
This is something I don't make.
This is
but
now-
they look amazing.
It's fully cooked. This is, so there's no need for it to go in the oven. Yeah, go for it.
So if I tried a bit.
Yeah, you'll be fine.
Oh, it's so white.
Very nice and stiff.
Mm.
Get it all off the.
It already tastes like the chewy meringue you get in the middle of your meringue.
It's a bit like a marshmallow at this point. So
David, do you want a little bit? David just sits here on the corner and we just pass things over to him every so often. Or we just stand here and eat them so that he has to watch and can't get involved. David's now pulling a face that's going, oh,
sometimes if you wanted to, you could add a bit of vanilla to this, just as it finishes off mixing, or some orange zest or anything. You don't want to add anything like that before it's pretty much done.
Yeah.
Because you don't want any fat getting into this, so any of the oils from the orange, or if there's any fat in anything, it will deflate it before it's risen up. But now that it's risen up, especially because we got it to the right temperature, that's it, it will stay like that now.
So, and it can hold the weight of something now?
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. So
this is the fun bit, isn't it?
yes, so the next step then is to start assembling our dessert, which calls for ice cream first. So here's one I made earlier.
If anybody watching on the video, they get a shot of Bob having a wee in the garden.
So I'm using vanilla ice cream for this one because I just think it works best. You can make your own. I didn't. I just got Haagen-Dazs because it's kind of, in my opinion, it's the smoothest one that you can buy in the supermarket.
So what I've noticed is you've set it so it's into a bit of a dome.
Yes. So I took it from the freezer, left it out for a bit, and then I lined this bowl with cling film, 2 layers of cling film. And to do that can be quite tricky actually, trickier than it sounds. But what you can do is lay the cling film over and just push it in and then fill the bowl with water, and that will force the cling film to vacuum to the bowl. So that's how you line a bowl with cling film, because it's actually quite tricky.
Say that again. So you put the 2 layers of
Put the
cling
2
film.
layers one at a time, layer of cling film over the bowl, just kind of push it in, don't try and get it too perfect, and then fill the whole thing with water.
Into
the cling film,
Yeah,
and then
so
chip it out. And
so
that
you
will,
push it against
it will push it, otherwise the cling film just sticks to you, it doesn't stick to the bowl.
But also then you have no air holes.
Exactly.
Okay.
So I did that, 2 layers of cling film, and then froze it overnight in this sort of dome shape, just to make it a bit easier. That will also be something you could do ahead of time, but it will just mean that you don't necessarily need to kind of be messing around with half frozen ice cream.
So it means that you've got that dome shape ready to go, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
So you're now attempting to peel off the cling film.
Peeling off my cling film. The only thing you want to make sure here is that you peel it off in 2 complete layers. If you've got layers that are half done, then they might be in your ice cream later on. So just try and make sure that it all stays pretty much intact.
Yeah, so it doesn't tear,
Yeah.
so you're not losing any.
Yeah, exactly. There we go.
So you've got a perfect disc of ice cream.
Yes. And
I'm
this
not,
is just
I'm not going to give you the bits of cling film now, David, to scrape the ice cream off.
This is just 1 pint of ice cream, because I don't like too much ice cream on my baked Alaska, but if you wanted to pile it high with ice cream, you could well do that. That's fine. So,
Did anyone ever say too much ice cream?
no, I don't think so. There's
Okay.
my ice cream going
So there's
straight on
your
top.
disc of
There we
ice
go.
cream on the top. Oh look, there's some bits that fell off onto the
Oh,
counter.
my hands are cold. Hands are freezing now. And now what I'm going to do, you want to work fairly quickly at this point, just to prevent your meringue, your ice cream from melting, is I'm going to take some nice big dollops of my meringue and just get it straight on top. And then I'm going to use my spatula, the offset spatula again, just to start kind of spreading it round and making sure that it covers the ice cream completely.
I just think the meringue, when it gets that snowy white colour, is just amazing.
Well, it's very festive as well, isn't it? You know, it's
So Sophie is now just using her offset palette knife to spread the meringue over the
I
top.
want to coax it down. I try not to get it past the edge of my pastry case too much, because I think that looks really nice, and you want to keep it, although it's a lot of, you know, lovely meringue on top, you still want it to look precise, I think. Or I do
Looks
anyway.
amazing.
If you were going to put this under the grill or back in the oven to brown the meringue, that's where you want to be careful that you're creating a seal in between
You don't want to
ice
brown what's
cream
underneath.
and your cake. So it won't be in there long enough to brown the pastry anymore, but if there are any gaps where there's a vent between the oven and your ice cream, the ice cream will just start melting.
Yeah. So you need to make sure it's well encased,
Yeah,
is what you're
exactly.
saying. If you put it under the grill or a broiler,
Yeah.
rather than doing it with your blowtorch. Because not everyone has a blowtorch.
No, they're pretty cheap. Again, they're not very expensive. So if you are into cooking,
I've always been very jealous because my photographer has one.
yeah, I mean,
Whenever I want one of them.
exactly. That's what I use it for most, is when I do content for Matthews.
Though you can't really use them with bread.
Not so much,
Because
no,
they-
because it will toast it. Rather
Not
than,
that I'd ever need to.
it's too
but-
precise for
Yeah,
bread.
but it ends up just setting bits on fire.
Exactly. So you want to make sure that it's a nice, even dome.
You're just piling it on
Yeah.
and giving it some nice swirls and
Yeah,
swishes.
that's the bit. If you're going to do, you don't have to put this under the grill or under a blowtorch if you wanted just to keep this as is, because the meringue is cooked. It's absolutely fine. You can just keep it nice and
So you
bright
could
white.
just eat it gooey like that.
Yeah, and it will still be gooey on the inside if you put it under the grill or anything. It will just brown the top nicely. But yeah, you could well just do it like this.
Oh, look at the peaks.
So if you are going
Great
to
swirly
do,
peaks.
yeah, if you're going to do the grill or the blowtorch or anything, the key is to create lots of little texture points, because that's what will brown and look lovely.
Okay, so that's what you see.
Yeah.
Okay.
If
so
you have it just smooth,
Yeah.
it will look really odd when you start browning.
Look, it's like snowy peaks.
Okay, I think that's enough meringue. So I'm just going to get my blowtorch.
So again, same question again. Could you say we'll do something with the leftover meringue?
Yes,
Could we dot that onto a baking tray and bake
yes,
little meringue pieces?
yes, completely.
Okay.
That's what I would do with it. You couldn't really save it, as in put it in the freezer or anything. There are some recipes you can do with this. So you could actually mix in some melted dark chocolate, and that's a really quick and easy chocolate mousse. Because the
Okay.
egg whites are the volume, so that's a great thing to do with it if you don't want to bake it off, but you wouldn't want to just kind of hang on to it like
So
this.
if we were gonna, which we probably will, if we dollop some of them onto a baking tray,
Yes.
you still want parchment paper?
Yeah, still parchment paper.
And how, I know you cook low and slow, don't
Yeah,
you?
yeah, you don't need to go as low and slow because it's already kind of cooked,
Yeah.
but I would do 170 for about 30 minutes, but it depends on the size of your
Okay.
dollops.
Oh, we'll do that afterwards. My husband will appreciate that. Okay,
Sure, it's
so
So now I'm going to use my blowtorch to make it look extra lovely.
look at that.
Let me just adjust my... I always start out with my blowtorch on a lower heat and work your way up.
But also the blowtorch, you need to keep it moving,
Yeah,
don't
moving
you?
all the time.
So you just keep moving around. We've got a real bake-off thing going on in our kitchen here. You can see a couple of the peaks with some of the lines starting to toast.
But this is really This is really classic for baked Alaska. You want that sort of very retro browning.
So how long could it be between this and then serving it?
Actually, if your ice cream has been fully in the freezer overnight and you're just putting it on then, you could actually do this probably about half an hour, 40 minutes before you serve it.
Okay, because it's pretty solid, the ice cream.
Yeah, exactly. If you've kind of had it out for a while, that drops the time down that you could keep it out for. But to be honest, even if it's a bit melty on the inside, it will still taste delicious. It almost goes a bit more like a custard filling. So
I'm going to get my plate out to put it on.
I've got one more finishing touch after this that I might put on.
Oh, what you got hidden up your
I've got
sleeve?
some gold shimmer.
Oh! I bought some, when it was the Queen's mega birthday, I can't remember what it was, or Jubilee, what was it? In past few years?
Oh yeah, the Jubilee.
And I challenged everyone to make some kind of celebratory loaf.
Yeah.
And I bought some gold and silver leaf to put on some bread.
Yeah.
It's not the easiest
No,
stuff
it's
to work
quite hard
with.
to work with.
I mean, it just adheres itself to every surface it touches.
Yeah. I did some gold foiling of a bookshelf that I repurposed on the back, and it took forever because it just sticks to everything.
And it just flies away.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was really and not cheap and really, really difficult to use. I mean, I was very pleased with what I created. It was the first and last time.
So,
wow!
a little bit more on this side, and I think that's enough.
Look at that. I mean, just like that would be perfect.
Yes.
Can I put it on the plate?
Yes, go for it. I don't know if I'm going to use it or not, but I do have this in the pot.
Okay.
Sometimes I like for Christmas just to do something extra glitzy.
Oh, that looks beautiful.
I'll just test it in.
I'm just going to take a picture of that as it is.
Yeah.
Look at that. I think that this is going to be very, very popular.
Bit of a twist on the classic because a baked Alaska is normally a cake base, and although we have got the Frangipane, it's just a bit more adult, almost a bit more kind of a bit easily palatable. I think traditional baked Alaskas sometimes a bit of a bad rep for being very overly sweet, but because we've put the spice in the Frangipane, we've got that kind of sharper jam on the bottom, and then we've got the nice tart plums. It should be quite palatable for everyone.
It's just so cool. I just keep thinking of the Grinch on his mountainside.
I've got this, it's for cakes, but it comes out in a very fine puff.
Oh,
just kind
okay. I've just got a little shimmer going on.
It will just mean that when it's under
It's like
your...
you're giving it a bit of makeup.
When it's on your Christmas lights at the table, it will look very nice and shiny. There you go, you can kind of see the glistening.
Oh wow,
Yeah,
we've
it's
got
not
some
too-
lights on and you
not
can
too
just see a
intense.
little bit. Do you know, it's like Sophie knows what she's doing.
And there you have it.
Oh, Sophie, that's beautiful.
And you could decorate it with a little glacé cherry.
And I want to take some photos
Okay.
and some videos. Go for it. We are
Oh, we can see
cutting
our ice
into the pavlova. I'm recording this so we can show you it from this side. So if you're watching the video, out it comes.
I'm going to slice out all there.
Look! Look at
There you go. It's
that!
almost like a self-saucing pudding when the ice cream gets a little bit melty.
Oh wow! Look at that!
But
We're
you
not
can
going to
see in
complain,
there
are we?
all the plum jam and the slices of plums and things as well. Let me cut slices.
That's... It's only a little bit, David. You can have a big piece.
Yeah, there's a bigger bit there if you want that bit, David.
You need to try a bit of your own doing. Right, it's tasting time.
It tastes just like Christmas.
Mm.
It's the spices, isn't it, in the
Yeah.
And the
Frangipane.
orange.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's all the same flavours, you know, but something I think a bit more palatable to those of us that don't like Christmas pudding or Christmas cake.
I want a bit of the Frangipane. Oh, that is good. Yeah. It's all quite sweet.
Yeah.
It's going to be perfect for those of you that love sweet. Oh. That pastry, you can see the layers.
Yeah, yeah. But it's it's just a bit more robust than your classic kind of English short crust pastry, which if you're, you know, a bit nervous about making pastry, it's just so much better, so much easier to handle.
Right. We are going to record a roundup in a second because we have someone else coming to do a bit of a taste, so we'll be back in a minute. Oh. And here we have it, that absolute thing of beauty. I really hope you've enjoyed watching and listening. As always, this podcast has been brought to you with Matthew's Cotswold Flour and Shanna's Sourdough. Please do listen to the actual podcast as well for our news. Otherwise, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Merry Christmas. And I hope you've enjoyed this year of podcasts.